January 15th, 1944. Norfolk House, London. General George S. Patton, Jr. is bent over a broad table blanketed with maps of northern France. With a red pencil, he has traced possible breakout routes from the beaches inland. Arrows slice across the paper, surrounded by speed estimates and distance calculations. In his mind, he has already envisioned the drive all the way to Berlin. An aide steps into the room without knocking. Patton doesn't look up. The aide clears his throat. "General, they've announced command structure for Overlord." Patton's pencil hesitates. "Montgomery is taking ground command." The pencil freezes halfway through a line. Patton slowly raises his head. "Say that again." The aide swallows. "Field Marshal Montgomery. He'll command all ground forces. 1st U.S. Army, 2nd British Army, everything." Patton stares at him. "Montgomery. Bernard Montgomery is commanding American troops." The aide nods. "Yes, sir." General Eisenhower felt that Montgomery's experience coordinating the Sicily operations. Patton cuts him off sharply. "I commanded in Sicily. Montgomery was so slow the Germans escaped to Italy with half their army." The aide shifts uncomfortably. "It's already decided, sir." Patton looks back down at the maps, at the arrows he's drawn, at the routes he's planned. After a long moment, he sets the pencil down. "Get out." The aide leaves. Patton remains alone in the room, staring at the maps of a campaign he will not be leading. If you're passionate about untold World War II stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to WW2 Elite. Hit the like button and drop a comment below telling us which general you think was right for D-Day. Your support helps us bring these incredible moments of history to life. Within hours, the news ripples through Allied headquarters. Staff officers whisper in corridors. American generals exchange tight, knowing looks. British officers nod in quiet approval. But the announcement reaches another office that same evening. Winston Churchill is sitting in his study at number 10, Downing Street, lighting a cigar, when his military secretary enters carrying a folder. "Prime Minister, the Overlord command structure has been finalized." Churchill opens a folder and studies the organizational chart. At the top, Eisenhower, Supreme Commander. Beneath him, Montgomery, Commander of Ground Forces. Below Montgomery, Bradley, commanding 1st U.S. Army. And off to the side, in smaller text, Patton, 3rd Army, Phase 2 operations only. Churchill stares at the chart for a long moment. Then he reaches for the telephone. "Get me General Eisenhower." The phone rings at SHEF headquarters. Eisenhower answers. "Mr. Prime Minister." Churchill's voice is calm. "Ike, I've seen your command structure. Montgomery over Bradley. Montgomery over everyone." Eisenhower leans back in his chair. "Prime Minister, Monty has experience coordinating multinational forces. He handled the 8th Army brilliantly at El Alamein." Churchill exhales a stream of cigar smoke. "He handled the 8th Army slowly. El Alamein to Tunis took 6 months. Patton crossed Sicily in 38 days. Eisenhower's voice hardens. "Patton also slapped 2 soldiers and nearly destroyed his career. He's brilliant on the battlefield, but he's a liability off it." Churchill responds. "So you're giving the Americans' greatest attack dog to Britain's most cautious general?" "I'm giving the invasion to someone who won't lose it in the first week." Eisenhower says. "We get one shot at this, Prime Minister. One. If we fail in Normandy, there is no second invasion. Montgomery doesn't take risks. That's exactly what I need." There's a long silence on the line. Then Churchill speaks again. "Ike, I'm not arguing the decision. I'm preparing you for the consequences." Eisenhower asks, "Which are?" Churchill answers, "Patton will hate Montgomery. Montgomery will ignore Patton. And Bradley will be trapped in the middle, trying to win a war while his superiors fight each other. Then I'll manage them," Eisenhower replies. Churchill's voice drops to a quiet murmur. "You'll try." He hangs up. Churchill sets the phone down and stares at a cigar. His secretary steps forward. "Sir, shall I draft a memo to the War Cabinet regarding the command announcement?" Churchill shakes his head. "No." He looks again at the organizational chart. Let's see how long it takes before Eisenhower realizes he's made Montgomery the most powerful British general since Wellington. And the Americans aren't going to like it. The secretary nods and withdraws. Churchill sits alone in his study, smoke curling upward in the lamplight. Back in London, Patton sits his quarters at night and opens his diary. February 3rd, 1944. He writes, "I am to sit in England like a spare tire while Montgomery lectures Bradley on how Americans should fight." He closes the diary and stares at the wall. For 18 months, Patton has been in combat. North Africa in 1942, Sicily in 1943. He has led American forces through victories and controversies alike. And now, the largest operation of the war, the one that would decide everything, is approaching, and he has been sidelined. Montgomery receives overall command. Bradley, Patton's junior, gets immediate battlefield authority, and Patton is assigned command of the Third Army whenever the Third Army is activated. If it is activated, the orders say Phase 2, post-breakout operations. That means Patton doesn't fight until someone else wins a beach. He is expected to sit in England and wait. Wait while others plan. Wait while others land. Wait while others fight. And if they fail, then Patton never fights at all. February turns into March. Patton submits a formal request to Eisenhower. He wants a frontline assignment, and he roll it all. He'll take a corps command under Bradley. He'll take a division if necessary. Just don't leave him in England. Eisenhower denies the request. Patton submits a second request. 2 weeks later, it's denied again. A third request in early March. Denied. Meanwhile, Montgomery holds planning conferences at his headquarters. Bradley attends. British generals attend. Canadian commanders, Royal Navy officers. Patton is not invited. He reads about the meetings and briefings that arrive days late. He watches the plans take shape. Without his input, maps are finalized. Timelines are locked. Objectives are assigned. And Patton is somewhere else, training an army that doesn't exist yet for a battle that may never happen. At SEF, the organizational structure becomes reality. Montgomery doesn't just accept ground command. He expands it. He requests operational control of Allied tactical air forces. He asks for direct authority over logistics and supply distribution. He begins referring to himself as Commander-in-Chief of Ground Forces in official communications, a title Eisenhower never formally granted him. And Bradley, commanding 1st U.S. Army, starts receiving instructions directly from Montgomery, not suggestions, orders, often issued without Eisenhower being informed first. March 21st, 1944. Bradley receives Montgomery's master plan for the breakout from Normandy. He reads it alone in his office. The plan assigns the British Second Army the primary thrust toward Cannes and the road network leading to Paris. The 1st U.S. Army is tasked with holding the western shoulder of the beachhead and drawing in German armored reserves. In plain terms, Bradley's Americans will absorb the casualties while Montgomery's British forces claim the breakthrough. Bradley picks up the phone and calls Eisenhower. "Ike, Montgomery's got me playing defense while he scores the touchdown." Eisenhower's voice sounds worn. "Brad, the plan works. Monty's methodology is sound. Just execute it." Bradley hesitates. "And what do I tell Patton when he finds out?" There's silence on the line. Then Eisenhower says quietly, "Don't tell him yet." He hangs up, but Montgomery isn't finished consolidating power, and what he does next makes even Churchill uneasy. By late March, Montgomery is holding court at his headquarters like a monarch. He issues directives. He sets policy. He even begins making public statements about Allied strategy without clearing them with Eisenhower first. British newspapers hail him as the architect of victory. American newspapers begin asking why a British general is commanding American troops. The tension spreads. At cocktail parties in London, American officers complain in low voices. British officers defend Montgomery's brilliance. And in Washington, members of Congress begin receiving letters from constituents asking why General Patton, a household name after Sicily, is sitting idle while the invasion is being led by someone most Americans have never heard of. April 10, 1944. Patton finally attends a planning session. He has been requesting access for weeks. Montgomery has agreed to brief senior commanders on the final Overlord plan. Patton takes a seat at the back of the room. Montgomery stands at the front, pointer in hand, moving through phase lines, consolidation periods, and supply timelines. He speaks for 2 hours, detailed and methodical, every risk accounted for, every contingency planned. When he finishes, he asks if there are any questions. Patton raises his hand. Montgomery looks at him. "Yes, George." Patton's voice is calm. "When do we stop planning and start killing?" The room goes silent. Montgomery blinks. "Excuse me," Patton continues. "You've been planning this invasion for months. At some point, we actually have to fight it. When does that happen?" Montgomery's voice turns cold. "General Patton, this is a methodical operation. We will advance as supplies and coordination permit. We are not cowboys charging across open country." Patton stands. "So we're to crawl across France." Montgomery's jaw tightens. "We're going to win across France. Slowly is better than recklessly." Patton looks straight at him. "In my experience, Field Marshal, quickly is better than both." No one speaks. Montgomery stares toward the door, then turns back to his maps and resumes the briefing as if nothing happened. That evening, Eisenhower receives 2 separate cables. The first is from Montgomery, requesting that General Patton be removed from the European theater. His attitude, Montgomery writes, is damaging to Allied cooperation and operational planning. The second cable is from Patton. Request transfer to the Pacific Theater. Suggests Montgomery be sent back to the desert, where slow worked. Eisenhower reads both messages, sets them aside, and opens his diary. He writes, "I am spending more time refereeing my generals than fighting Germans." Monty and Patton hate each other. Bradley is trapped in the middle, and I'm trying to plan the largest invasion in history, while my commanders behave like children. He closes the diary, rubs his eyes, and makes a decision. He will keep both generals. Montgomery will command the landing. Patton will wait, and Eisenhower will somehow manage the fallout. By April, Patton has been sidelined for 3 months. Then he makes a decision that nearly ends his career again. April 25, 1944. Patton is invited to speak at a British Welcome Club in Knutsford, a small English town. The event is intended to promote Allied unity. Patton is trying to mend fences. He stands at a podium before British civilians and a handful of journalists. He delivers a short speech about friendship between nations. Then he adds, "The British and Americans are destined to rule the world." The audience applauds politely, but a reporter at the back of the room writes it down differently. The next morning, newspapers print, Patton says Americans and British, and possibly the Russians, are destined to rule the world. Either Patton failed to mention the Soviets, or the reporter failed to include them. Either way, the press explodes. American newspapers call it an insult to Stalin. British papers accuse Patton of undermining the alliance. Soviet officials express concern. In Washington, Congress erupts. 18 congressmen send telegrams to the War Department demanding Patton be relieved immediately. April 27, 1944. Eisenhower is handed a stack of press clippings. He reads them once, then again. Then he picks up the phone and calls General George Marshall, the Army Chief of Staff in Washington. Marshall's voice is sharp. "Ike, I protected Patton through the slapping incidents. I protected him through press disasters. I've defended him to Congress, to the President, to the Joint Chiefs. How many times can one general step on his own grenade? Eisenhower answers quietly, he's the best attack commander we have. Then use him or lose him, Marshall replies. But if you keep him, you'd better unleash him before he explodes, because I can't protect him anymore. The next time he makes headlines, he's finished. Eisenhower hangs up and sits at his desk for a long time. He stares at the press clippings, at the cables from congressmen, at a note from Stalin's ambassador asking whether Patton speaks for American policy, and at a private message from Churchill that reads simply, "This is what happens when you give a loaded gun to a child." Meanwhile, 3,000 miles away, someone else is watching the disaster unfold, and he is about to force Eisenhower's hand. At Bradley's headquarters, Bradley speaks to his staff. Montgomery thinks Patton is a barbarian. Maybe he is, but when we break out of Normandy, I want that barbarian loose in France, not stuck in England writing apology letters. One of his aides asks, "Do you think I will keep him?" Bradley looks at the arrows marking the planned breakout routes. He has to, because if we get stuck in Normandy, Patton's the only one fast enough to save us. At Montgomery's headquarters, Montgomery addresses his British staff officers. If they insist on keeping Patton, then at least keep him away from journalists and away from command. An officer asks, "Do you believe he'll be effective, sir?" Montgomery replies, "Patton is a talented tactical commander, but tactics are not strategy, and strategy is what wins wars." He turns back to his maps, confident, methodical, certain. But Eisenhower has already decided, despite the scandal, despite the political pressure, despite the calls for Patton's head, Eisenhower keeps him. He releases a public statement. General Patton has committed no military offense. He will take command of Third Army when operations require his services. It is a public vote of confidence. Privately, Eisenhower does something else. May 1st, 1944. He summons Patton to his office. Patton walks in and snaps to attention. Eisenhower looks at him. "Sit down, George." Patton sits. Eisenhower asks, "Do you want to go home, or do you want to fight?" "Fight." Eisenhower nods. "Then shut up. Stay out of trouble. Stop giving speeches. Stop talking to reporters. And wait for Monty to crack open Normandy. Then I'm turning you loose." Patton leans forward. "And if Montgomery doesn't crack it open, then I will have chosen the wrong ground commander," Eisenhower says. "But that's my problem, not yours. Your problem is staying ready. Can you do that?" Patton nods. "Yes, sir." "Then get out of here before you make another headline." Patton salutes and walks out. For the first time in months, he smiles. June 6, 1944. D-Day. The invasion begins. Montgomery's plan unfolds almost exactly as designed. American and British forces land on 5 beaches. Casualties are heavy but manageable. By nightfall, the Allies are ashore. Montgomery's methodical approach works. No catastrophic failures. No operational collapse. The beachhead holds. But then the problems begin. June turns into July. The breakout is supposed to happen within days, but Montgomery's forces bogged down around Cannes. British Second Army. The Second Army attacks and is stopped, attacks again, and is stopped again as German armored divisions pour into the fight, turning the campaign into a brutal stalemate. First U.S. Army under Bradley holds the western flank exactly as planned, but the main thrust, Montgomery's responsibility, does not move, days turning into weeks and weeks into a month, until by late July Allied forces have advanced less than 30 miles from the beaches. The press begins asking hard questions. Eisenhower comes, under mounting pressure from Washington and London, and Patton is still in England waiting until July 28, 1944, when Eisenhower makes a call to activate Third Army and unleashes Patton. On August 1st, 1944, Patton's forces cross into France, and everything changes, because within 10 days, Third Army races nearly 200 miles across Brittany toward the Seine River, Patton refusing to consolidate or wait for supplies, driving forward relentlessly and overwhelming everything in his path. so that by August 10th, he has advanced farther in 10 days and Montgomery has advanced in 2 months, his column stretching supply lines to the breaking point. Tanks running on fumes but still moving as German resistance collapses, while Montgomery's British forces continue grinding forward around Caen. The contrast stark, brutal, and undeniable. On August 12, 1944, Winston Churchill visits Eisenhower's headquarters in Normandy, and the two men stand in a command tent studying a massive wall. Map where blue arrows mark Allied positions and red marks the Germans. Patton's Third Army shown as a deep blue spear thrusting east almost to the German border, while Montgomery's 21st Army Group appears as a dense blue mass still clustered around Caen. Churchill standing with hands clasped behind his back and a cigar in his mouth as Eisenhower stands beside him with arms crossed. Churchill quietly saying, "You kept him." Eisenhower nodding that he did. Churchill pointing at the map and remarking that Patton is halfway to Germany while Montgomery is still polishing his boots at Caen. Eisenhower defensively explaining that Monty absorbed the German armor and held Rommel and von Kluge in place, so Patton could break through as planned. Churchill raising a hand to say he is not criticizing Montgomery's plan, because it worked. Slowly, but it worked. Then explaining that Eisenhower chose the right general to win the landing, but Patton is the right general to win the war. Montgomery winning methodically and Patton winning quickly, and that between the two Eisenhower has learned the difference. Churchill continuing that Montgomery was perfect for Normandy because on June 6 one mistake would have doomed the invasion and fractured the alliance. But that phase is over, and now the war requires someone who reacts and moves so fast the enemy cannot respond. Someone like Patton, whom Eisenhower kept caged for 6 months out of fear of what he might break, and who is now breaking everything, including the German army. Eisenhower staring at the map at the two generals' arrows as Churchill quietly adds that genius cannot be commanded, only aimed. That Montgomery is a genius at not losing while Patton is a genius at winning, and that you cannot put a sprinter under a marathon runner's coat forever. Eventually you must let him run. Eisenhower finally seeing clearly the consequences of his January decision, the months of tension, frustration, and lost time that came from choosing safety over speed, as Churchill turns to leave and pauses to warn that Montgomery will never forgive Eisenhower for letting Patton outshine him, and Patton will never forgive being made to wait, leaving Eisenhower alone in the tent staring at two arrows pointing toward Germany, one slow and one fast, both necessary and both impossible to control. By September 1st, 1944, just 1 month after Third Army's activation, the numbers tell the story as Patton's forces advance 400 miles across France, liberate more than 100,000 square miles of territory, capture 65,000 German prisoners, and reach the German border ahead of every other Allied army, while Montgomery's 21st Army Group remains consolidating around Caen and the Seine, the gap so wide that Eisenhower quietly begins shifting command authority. Montgomery retained nominal ground command on paper, but in practice Eisenhower began issuing orders directly to Bradley and Patton, and by September Montgomery's role was largely ceremonial. The command structure Eisenhower built in January effectively dead, even if it had not yet been formally buried, because Churchill understood something Eisenhower learned the hard way. You cannot command genius. You can only aim it. Montgomery was a genius at not losing, a commander who planned meticulously, prepared relentlessly, consolidated methodically, and won battles by refusing to make mistakes, which made him perfect for Normandy, where a single error could doom the invasion, collapse the politics, fracture the alliance, and drag the war on for years, and Montgomery's caution, discipline, and fear of failure ensured that would not happen, while Patton was a genius at winning. A commander who did not plan so much as react, who did not consolidate but charge forward, who won by moving faster than the enemy could think, making him ideal for exploitation, for the breakout, and for pursuit across France, but also making him a nightmare for planning, for politics, and for Eisenhower himself. Eisenhower tried to harness both by placing one above the other, only to discover that it could not be done, because you cannot put a tiger under a zookeeper forever. Eventually, the tiger either breaks out or you let it loose. Years later, after the war, Eisenhower wrote in his memoirs that Giving Montgomery initial ground command was correct from a planning standpoint because Montgomery understood coalition warfare, logistics, and the stakes involved, but whether it was correct psychologically was another matter, admitting that Patton never forgave him, that Montgomery never understood why Patton was necessary, and that Bradley spent 3 months trapped between two commanders who despised each other, concluding that in hindsight, he should have been clearer from beginning. Montgomery commands until the breakout, then Patton commands, because by trying to manage both he nearly lost both. On August 15, 1944, 2 weeks into Patton's rampage across France, Montgomery sent Eisenhower a message requesting that Patton's fuel supplies be diverted to British forces for a concentrated northern thrust toward the Ruhr, arguing that a single decisive blow would end the war faster than multiple advances. And Eisenhower, studying the map with Patton's Third Army already at the German border and Montgomery's forces far behind, read the request twice before replying simply that the request was denied and operations would continue as planned, a decision that enraged Montgomery, who protested, argued, and even threatened resignation. But Eisenhower did not relent, because by August 1944 he had finally learned the lesson Churchill tried to teach him in January. You chose the right general to win the landing, but Patton is the right general to win the war, a lesson Churchill later summarized by saying you can cage a tiger for the circus, but when you need something killed, you open the cage. The story of Montgomery and Patton is not one of right and wrong, but of different kinds of genius. Montgomery's being patience, control, and refusal to lose. Patton's being speed, instinct, and refusal to stop. And Eisenhower needed both, but made the mistake of believing one could command the other, learning painfully over 6 months of tension and frustration that genius does not take orders and must instead be aimed and then trusted. As Eisenhower aimed Montgomery at Normandy and received a landing that did not fail, then aimed Patton at Germany and unleashed a pursuit that did not stop. The tragedy being that he wasted 6 months trying to force them to work together. 6 months of Patton sitting idle. 6 months of Montgomery accumulating power he should never have had. And 6 months of Bradley trapped in between. Because Churchill saw it coming in January and warned Eisenhower, and in August, standing in that tent in Normandy, delivered the lesson Eisenhower had learned the hard way. You chose the right general to win the landing, but Patton is the right general to win the war. And between the two you have learned the difference, which is a story of what Churchill said when Eisenhower chose Montgomery over Patton for D-Day. A story about leadership, about knowing when to be cautious and when to be bold, about understanding that different missions require different men, and about learning, sometimes too late, that you cannot cage a tiger and expect it to remain tame. And if you found this story as powerful as we did, subscribe to WW2 Elite, so you don't miss our next deep dive into the leadership decisions that shaped history. Hit the like button, share this with a fellow history lover, and let us know in the comments who you think Eisenhower should have chosen.